You can look in the past. Look at, I'm only in the last, 5 or 6 years, I really got attracted to India and the Indian culture, Muslim culture of India, and read the history and studied it, and was just so amazed at the Indian culture. It's just an incredible culture of diversity, of intelligence, the people that gave the world mathematics, the people that gave so many gifts to our civilization. And one of the tragedies of Islam, of the Muslims today, is they don't recognize even the pre-Islamic civilizations. Anybody who reads early Muslim literature, and I'm talking about up to about 600-700 years ago, you'll marvel at the number of Hindu sages that are quoted by Muslims. Muslims had no problem taking wisdom. Wherever it was, they took it. Innis begzarad. Innis begzarad. It's one of the wisdoms from a pre-Islamic Persian king who asked a wise man of Persia, I want you to give me a word that when I'm at the heights of the dunya, it will remind me, and when I'm at the bottom, I want the same thing. So he went and spent time, and then he came back with a ring, and on it said, Innis begzarad. This too shall pass. So when you're at the heights, just remember, this too shall pass. When you're at the bottom, this too shall pass. This is dunya. Do dinki dunya hai. It's 2 days. It's just 2 days. One day you're up, the next day you're down. It's a half an inch of water and you think you're going to drown, as John Pine said. So look at this culture. One of the most beautiful cultures, and I fell in love with it 40 years ago, because the first Muslim village, Muslim country I went to was Morocco. And I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with the people. I spent 1 month with Amazigh people up in the Atlas Mountains, Sidi Saleh. Just such beautiful people. And it's all from the Prophet ﷺ. But they every year in August, they would go, they're originally Bedouin, so they would go up to this valley and they would put tents up. They had 2 tents, one for Khatam al-Qur'an and the other for Dalail al-Khirat. And they kept it going 24/7 with a munawaba. And then they would only break to eat. And so we went up, there was a group of Muslims from England and the US, and I was with them. And one of the most powerful lessons that I ever got in my life was from these people. So there were these 2 women with us in the group, and we had 2 cars, and so they made an amir of each car. And so these 2 women were at loggerheads the whole time. They were really just didn't get, you have this problem with people. You just don't get along with people sometimes. And so they actually got into a fight. And so the Amir who was with us, he said, no, let them, they need to get this out of their system. That's what he said. So they're letting these 2 women fight. One of these Amazigh men saw this happening. He ran and he broke it up. He said, la, 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 Allahumma salli ala nabi. And he pulled them apart. And then they went and told Sidi Saleh. So he got all of us together and he gave us a dars about Islah Dhat al-Bayn. Don't let Muslims fight. That's from the Prophet ﷺ, because he said that is the highest thing. If you really want to know the essence of this thing, it's rectifying between people. And look at our culture. When a fight breaks out, everybody starts saying, fight, fight. And they surround it. And they watch people fight like animals. This is our culture. But this is not a prophetic culture. The prophetic culture breaks these illnesses. And that's why our prophet, everything he did was medicinal. And that's why when you have this uswa, this example, we have to take it and we have to practice it and we have to preach it and we have to teach it and we have to remind our ummah, ourselves, our ummah, and then the world. Because the world looks at Muslims now, what do we have to offer? فَاقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْطِي. Somebody that doesn't have anything can't give anything. But we have something, we're just holding on to it. Hudayf ibn al-Yaman said towards the latter days, the Muslims would be like a big rock in the river. It wouldn't let people drink from it, and it wouldn't drink from it. That's what he said. Like a hajar fi nahar. لا يشرب منه ولا يخلي الناس يشرب منه. It won't drink from it, and they won't let others drink. So this is the Shifa of Qadi Iyad. This was one of the most important books in the history of Islam. It was written by a great Andalusian, North African, Moroccan scholar, Qadi Iyad. They said, لولا المصطفى لولا الشفاء ما عرف المصطفى. If it wasn't for the Shifa, you wouldn't have known the Prophet ﷺ. I want you to just think about this. This is a handwritten, this is a facsimile, but it's handwritten, gold ink embroidery. Anytime the Prophet's name is mentioned, gold ink, gold ink, gold ink. There were so many copies when I first went to shop for handwritten manuscripts in Morocco. There were so many copies of this because so many Moroccans, they used to carry this book. They would read this book with the Qur'an. In their kashkul, they would have this kashkul and they would carry this, Dalail Khairat, and the Qur'an. When anybody got sick, they read this book with Niyatul Shifa. This is an amazing book. It's a beautiful book. It's one of the most beautiful things that anybody's ever written. And it will tell you who your prophet is. When you read this book, if you're not in love right now, you will fall in love with this man. Because everything about this man is beautiful. Everything about this man is amazing. There's nobody like him in the history of our species. And people can't see it because they're blinded. Many Muslims are blinded. They can't see who he is. But just to give you a little example of who he was, there's so many things that we could say, but this is a beautiful testimony, and I can't do a better job than just to let you know. But this was written by one of our great scholars. It's a very short book. It was written in the 8th century by Shamsuddin. He was known as bin Ahmed bin Sayyid al-Nas. And he said about the Prophet ﷺ, his akhlaq, ومن أخلاقه صلى الله عليه وسلم سئلت عائشة رضي الله عنها عن أخلاقه فقالت كان خلق القرآن. His character was the Qur'an. He would get angry for the Qur'an, in other words, the things that the Qur'an warned us about, and he would be pleased with the Qur'an. He would never take vengeance for his own self, nor would he get angry for his own self. He never got angry for himself. Only if the sanctities of Allah were in any way sacrilege. That's the only time he would get upset. He got upset for Allah, but he would never, لَمْ يَقُمْ لِغَضَبِهِ أَحَدٍ. He would never allow that, the ghadab of anybody to rile him. كَانَ أَشْجَعَ النَّاسِ وَأَسْخَاهُمْ. He was the bravest of men. He was the most generous of men. He was the most giving of men. They said if you did not have la in the kalima, he never would have used the word. لولا لا في الشهادة لما قال لا قط. He always said na'am. One time somebody asked him for a Bedouin kept asking, and he said, I'll take a loan. And Omar said, ما كلفك الله بهذا. And the Prophet looked at Omar, and he's teaching Omar because Omar has a very high maqam. And he frowned at Omar. He looked at Omar and he let him know that no. And then one of the Ansar said, أنفق يا رسول الله ولا تخافوا. Just give out and don't be worried. And he smiled and he said, هكذا أمرت. Like this I was commanded. So he never said no to anybody. لا يبيته في بيتي دينار ولا درهم. He would not sleep with anything in his house. He would always give out from charity. This is absolute trust in Allah. It's a high maqam. It's not for everybody. The Prophet also taught us ليدخر, to save, to even food. The Prophet, the Arabs had a lot of famine, so he would put food for a year, but it would always be exhausted because he would give it out to poor people. لا يأخذ مما آتاه الله شيئا إلا قوت أهله. He would only take from what Allah had given him except just enough for his family. And he said, من أصبح آمنا في سربه معافا في بدنه له قوت يومه فكأنما حيز الدنيا بحذافيرها. Anyone who gets up and is safe in his person, in his property, he's safe in his person, he's got good health, and he has enough for that day, just that day, it's as if he has the whole world and everything in it. That's our Prophet ﷺ. He said, don't expect to see the end of the day. Every day should be the last day as far as you're concerned. And then he mentioned the things, so I won't mention those. They were mentioned in that beautiful hadith in the Shemail. But then he says, كَانَ أَعَفَّ النَّاسِ وَأَشَدُّهُمْ إِكْرَامًا لِأَصْحَابِهِ. He was the most chaste of men, and he was the most generous to his companions. لَا يَمُدُّ رِجْلَيْهِ بَيْنَهُمْ. He would never outstretch his feet in the presence of his companions. In other words, he would always respect them. With the Arabs, it was always considered to put your soles of your feet to face somebody was aib. The Arabs didn't do that. In fact, there's a famous story of Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, when a man was asking him really stupid questions, and he said, what time is it? He said, it's time for Abu Hanifa to stretch his legs. But he never did that, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَيُوَسِّعُ عَلَيْهِمْ إِذَا ضَاقَ الْمَكَانِ. And he would always give them room. If there was no room, I was once with a Mauritanian sheikh, really great sheikh who died, Allah yarhamu, the son of Muhammad al-Amin, and we were going to the masjid when I was living in Medina. I was a young man studying there, and we came into the masjid, and I'll never forget this. He came up, and he asked this man, حُزْ عَنَّا, he said, يا أخي المكان ضيق. He said, the place is ضيق. He said, الضيق في القلوب. He said, that constriction is in your own heart. And we just went somewhere else. But he missed the opportunity to sit next to a great scholar. He was a mufassir of Qur'an. He said, الضيق في القلوب. It's not in the space. There's always room. There's always room. يُكْرِمُ أَهْلَ الْفَضْلِ. This is very important because the Prophet ﷺ recognized manazil. Everybody is equal in their humanity. Everybody is equal in their spiritual possibility for salvation. But people are different in their contribution to a culture, to a civilization, to a village, to a family. They're different. And that's why Sayyidina Ali said, قِيمَةَ الْمَرْءِ فِي مَا يَحْسَنُهُ. The value of a man is in his ihsan, what he does well. So he would always, يُنَزِّلَ النَّاسِ مَنَازِلَهُم, and he said, I was commanded to do that. He didn't treat scholars the same way he treated other people. This was our Prophet ﷺ. Whoever saw him suddenly was always taken aback because he had a haiba. But if he sat with them, they would fall in love. And there are many people who came and they said he was the most odious person to them because of what they'd heard. All the like poor people here. Many people hate the Prophet because they don't know. They heard lies about him. They heard lies. Really terrible lies too. And so once they got to know him, they would love him. Sophia, the Jewish, she was the wife of one of the notables When Khaybar happened, she was taken captive. The Prophet sat with her for 2 hours explaining why he fought her family. And she said, he was the most hated person to me. And after those 2 hours, there was nobody in this world more beloved to me. And one day she came to him complaining about how the women called her a Yahudiya. He said, go back, tell them, my father's Aaron, my uncle's Moses, and my husband's Muhammad. Nothing to be ashamed of, something to be proud of. One of my Mauritanian teachers came here, and we visited this place in New Mexico, and there was a Jewish man who'd converted to Islam. And he treated him so well. I was really amazed. He just treated him so well. And one day I just asked him, he said, MashaAllah, you're really taken to Mustafa. He said, Hada wali min awliyaillah. That's what he told me. He said, he's a wali. I said, how do you know? He said, Yahudi aslama hada wilaya. He said, so you have to consider them wilaya. It's very hard for that community. They were given so much. Allah gave them so much. Allah gave them continual prophets. What He gave us was continual ulama. See, our ulama are like the prophets of Bani Israel. And those of us who've studied with them, the real ulama, not the likes of, we're like Tufailiyun ala Ma'idah. The real ulama, if you study with Murabt al-Hajj, anybody who met him, you sit with these people and you know that these people, they have miraculous lives. The amount of ibadah they can do, the fact that they never speak ill of people. Just that, if you meet anybody that never speaks ill of people, assume they're a wali of Allah. Because it's a hard thing to do. It's just easy to do it. Ahmad Zarruq said, the most dangerous thing you can ask anybody is how's so-and-so? Because he said, يَفْتَحُ بَابَ الْغِيبَةِ. It opens the door of backbiting. And he said that Imam Nawawi called something غِيبَةً مُتَفَقِّهِ. Like the ghiba of somebody who has a little bit of learning. Miskeen, fulan, poor man, Allah yahdi, may Allah guide him. He pretends to have compassion for him. He always accepted the excuse of somebody who gave him an excuse. Even the people that lied to him, he would always accept it. When children under 7, you should never assume they're lying. They just live in a magical world where you say, who broke the vase? I don't know. That's a possibility in a 5-year-old's mind, right? They're not in the age of tamyiz, so you have to forgive them. But as you get older, people learn how to lie. But your children, I would never, if my child told me something, I would, sometime my wife would say, he's not telling the truth. I said, no, it's impossible. He would never lie to us. We're his parents. I wanted them to understand that I couldn't believe they would lie. And that's the way the Prophet ﷺ was. He gave people husn al-dhan, even though he knew what they were up to, but he would always do that. He would never let anybody walk behind him. He would, subhanallah. And he used to say, let the angels walk behind me. He wouldn't let them walk behind him. One man, there was a servant who he asked him to get up on his camel so he could ride with him. He was too, he just couldn't do it. And so the Prophet said, you go ahead. You go ahead to where you're going. Don't go behind me. So he wouldn't even go ahead of him. He would never walk faster. If an old person was walking, he would never go ahead of them. He would slow down. Because old people, it makes them feel old when somebody just briskly walks by them.